This video is sponsored by Nebula, the educational streaming service created by me and my creator friends. Check out the link in the description or stay tuned to learn more. New York is known for its rather slow and often stationary transit expansion and its ability to not get with the times. The city was slow to implement smart payment cards, slow to implement walk-through trains, and it's been slow modernizing the subway. So when the IBX, that is the Interborough Express project, was announced, one that didn't have to be slow or expensive or behind the times, all things which have characterized transit expansion in New York for a long time, there was a ton of excitement, naturally. But with it inching forward and before shovels actually turn, I think it's worth asking if we're building the right thing, or if North America's light rail obsession has struck again. Hey, I'm Reese and this is RM Transit, a channel about public transit projects and how they could be better. By the way, if you like this Trains, Trains, and More Trains shirt, you should consider checking out the Urban Caffeine store, and Urban Caffeine, which has a ton of good videos on New York. Before we dive into the IBX's potential shortcomings, what is it? The project would be a 14-mile, 19-station orbital light rail line, i.e. trams, running through Brooklyn and Queens, though unlike other light rail plans meant to connect Brooklyn and Queens, this one actually seems like it's going to happen. The route would actually run on an existing but rather degraded right-of-way, which has a bunch of room and some very light freight traffic, at least for most of it. The southernmost section of the route really only has a couple of freight trains per day, and the northern section, while it does have more trains, is only about 2.5 miles long. Because of some tricky sections where the corridor is tight, or because of existing infrastructure which can't very easily handle 2 extra tracks for light rail, there would be a short section above ground in the middle of the route running on street. This new line would be super useful, allowing for a faster and more reliable route through outer parts of Brooklyn and Queens, running circles around existing bus routes but also holding the potential to connect to a ton of existing radial subway lines. Better yet, since it's a pretty straightforward project, the right-of-way is basically already there, it could be built quickly and quite cost-effectively, at least compared to New York's existing transit projects. This is the part of the video where I point out that if the current plan for a light rail route here happens, I would still be happy. It would be a useful line for so many New Yorkers, it would expand transit access to some underserved communities, it would be electric transit that competes with driving, and it would provide more connections and hopefully better service than the existing orbital G train. So if you think the current plan is sufficient, you can stop watching here. But I want more than sufficient, and my concerns begin with how light rail was chosen in the first place. The analysis that was done to determine that light rail was the option to move forward with for the IBX considered 3 different transit modes, including buses and commuter rail. And I mean, I could make an entire video talking about how the urban rail option being labeled commuter rail doesn't send the right message. There are a lot of issues beginning from that analysis of the different mode choices, and I get that some people just want something to be built, but I hope for myself in 2024 I can pull less punches, and the reality is we aren't going to have great public transit in North America if we settle for good enough. For one, while the project documents do at least highlight that the commuter rail option would use trains that are more like the subway than say the Long Island Railroad, it doesn't make it clear why subway wasn't an option that was at least analyzed. The official reason is that subway can't mix with freight, but light rail also can't mix with freight. Solutions had to be found to make the light rail option work, and it's not clear to me why similar solutions weren't at least investigated for subway. This is especially frustrating because there are so many shapes and sizes of subway that could have worked around the freight constraint, and the reality is there is so much of this line with so little freight on it. There are also the usual weird oddball things in the report, like saying the light rail option would be faster than commuter rail, despite the fact that the light rail option has to do this weird dogleg in the middle of the route. There's also the suggestion that a new service would run up to every 5 minutes in the peak hour and every 15 minutes off peak, which sounds good for a bus in a small city in the middle of nowhere. This just isn't a good level of service for a city the size of New York. If Vancouver, a city of around 2.5 million, can manage to run the SkyTrain every 3 minutes until late at night, surely New York can do better than 5 minutes on peak and 15 minutes off peak. Seriously, this level of frequency is bad for a modern transit project, and frequency is the thing that this project will live or die on, with connections to other routes being so important. With so many passengers transferring, potentially having to wait 15 minutes for a transfer is a terrible idea, and not the type of transit we should be building for the future. The cynical part of me imagines that the bad service levels here, which shouldn't exist on any newly built line anywhere in the world, since there are automated metro systems, including at many airports in the United States, is a way of making the light rail option look kind of good. Since, as I mentioned, light rail would have to run on street for a section in the middle of the route, it would likely be limited to at most every 5 minutes, as is pretty common for surface running light rail in North America with our long signal timings and the like. But the question is, wouldn't a higher frequency option make subway or commuter rail look better? By setting the standard as pretty low frequency, you can make the light rail option look more compelling than it really is. I think generally speaking, the sense I get, and this could be wrong, is that the reason light rail is seen as the attractive option is because project proponents believe it will be an easy thing to build. You see, it's well known and well publicized that New York struggles immensely building transit projects, which cities in other places in the world, which have unions and accessibility requirements, could do faster and for cheaper. And it might make the MTA look good to build something fairly quickly and with a cost that is less than $1 billion per mile. But it basically feels like a PR stunt. Look guys, we did it! We built the thing quickly and the cost wasn't in the double-digit billions of dollars. Alright, but you did that by building a worse thing, and for a cost that is still way higher than what cities like Paris and Seoul are building for. And remember, this is for a line that is mostly being built in existing right-of-way. $420 million per mile for that is not good. In fact, in places like Spain and Scandinavia, entire subways are built for less money than the IBX in an existing right-of-way, often above ground. This might be a good price for New York, but it's not a good price. Now obviously light rail is a compromise solution, and that's defensible in some places, like say in a small town, where you're not sure if transit will take off. Or in a city where there's already an extant tram system and the light rail system would just be an extension of that. Or in a place where running on the street is completely unavoidable. But really, should one of the world's wealthiest cities, with what remains one of the largest and best used rapid transit systems in the world, really be going for the compromise option, especially for a project that will be one of the biggest the city builds for decades? Some folks make a comparison with the London Overground, parts of which run more frequently than the IBX and 24 hours a day, and all of which having nice modern electrical multiple unit trains. But the London Overground was mostly a sprucing up and upgrading of existing urban rail lines which already had some level of passenger service. It's a great system to be sure, but the connections aren't amazing, and the project was mostly an upgrading rather than conceiving of something entirely new. It was good value for London as well. The city didn't have to spend a ton of money, and it got a lot of good transit service for it. By comparison, the IBX route has no passenger service on it today, but that's an opportunity. We can imagine something far greater for it than shinier trains and cleaned up stations. And so this is the part of the video where I say what I think should be done. A subway. Maybe not a New York subway, maybe a higher frequency automated one with smaller trains like Copenhagen. Or maybe something like Hong Kong's East Rail Line, a metro line which runs a great deal of its length on surface tracks with huge trains. Maybe you won't agree with all of my points, but if you even agree with a few of them, then rapid transit is an option that should at least be seriously given a study. And to be clear, I agree that the MTA shouldn't only have to pursue hard projects. It's good for a transit agency to have some wins with easier projects, but a subway on the IBX route should be a pretty easy project. It would be in Paris, it would be in London, it would be in Hong Kong. The MTA should be able to build a subway here for an order of magnitude less money than say on 125th Street. The great thing about the IBX corridor is it's already grade separated. Cities like Paris, who are building new orbital rail routes, are spending billions on tunnels so that they can have that grade separation, and New York basically gets it for free. Sure, there might be sections of the route where the right-of-way is a bit narrow, or where existing tunnels need to be modified for subway trains. And you still do have to make provision for freight, which is a really important consideration. Rail freight is great, but this should mean considering short new tunnels or sections of elevated track, not throwing out the subway option. But the truth is, if for $6 billion the MTA can't deliver a few short tunnels or upgrades to the right-of-way for subway trains, then this isn't a cost-effective project, it's just a cheap project. And some of the claims about the ability to use the existing tunnels seem wild. I recently read an article by the blogger BQ Rail, who talks about the choice not to put an IBX station at Broadway Junction, connected to one of the most important subway stations in the outer boroughs of New York. Largely because the East New York Tunnel, which the route would run through at this point, doesn't have enough room. To be clear, this tunnel has 4 tunnels at this point, and so it wasn't entirely clear to me initially reading this article why you couldn't, say, use 2 of those tunnels for tracks for the rail route, and then 1 of them for a platform, still leaving 1 on the side for freight trains. At which point I saw this. Indeed, people seriously proposed digging an entirely new tunnel under an existing tunnel so 2 pipes didn't have to be moved. Oh. What's funny though is that this probably wouldn't be an issue if New York was effective at building subway infrastructure for low cost. It could build its new tunnel and things would be fine. We wouldn't even have to necessarily consider moving those pipes, though moving the pipes shouldn't be that big of a deal. Because of the extremely high costs with which New York builds transit, planners have to choose a worse project if they want a reasonably priced project. The reality is though that the existing IBX plans are irrational from a cost and right-of-way perspective. I complain about Toronto's Eglinton Crosstown a ton because it dug tons of new tunnels for similar tram-type vehicles as the IBX, just to send vehicles up into the street in the east end of the city, kneecapping the capacity of the whole line. But New York is considering popping trains above ground for a few blocks in the middle of what is otherwise a grade-separated line, possibly without even having a station there, which is way worse. Marco Kitty made a great graphic which highlights why this is absurd. A line which could be a subway but isn't because of a short at-grade section in the middle is a bad idea. There should be a subway line with an inexpensive grade separation in the middle. The second thing is that orbital routes should be extremely high frequency. As I said earlier in the video, frequency is critical for orbital transit lines. That's because the orbit is often just one part of a longer trip. If you have very low frequencies, this effectively artificially inflates the length of every single trip, since passengers will often have to wait a great deal of time on the platform before they get on the IBX train. So you should try to run trains as frequently as possible. Up to every 90 seconds is seen in some modern subway systems. Unfortunately, of course, these kind of super high frequencies do require a fully grade separated route, but the IBX has that. There's also the fact that subway options can handle yard space constraints and have off-the-shelf rolling stock. One argument I've heard a lot for light rail has been the ability to buy off-the-shelf rolling stock, as well as run trains on the street to access a yard location. This is a real benefit, but if you went with subway, you could just use subway trains which can run on the existing subway system. That means potentially serving a subway-style route with an expanded existing yard, or potentially a new facility, which New York kind of already needs because there's not enough yard space for the New York City subway. And while those trains might not be off the shelf, you'd have something that's basically just as good, compatibility with this giant existing system. You could, of course, also just build your yard somewhere else, or provide a grade-separated access for trains to the yard. The yard is an important consideration for a transit project, but it probably shouldn't be the reason you go with light rail instead of the very rational option of subway. And if you're just building a new subway line, there's no reason you can't still use off-the-shelf rolling stock, like what's used on the REM or Sydney Metro or the Grand Paris Express. And then there's the fact that a subway could handle more ridership and provide more expansion opportunities. For one, a subway train of the same length as the proposed light rail vehicles is going to have higher capacity, because it doesn't need to handle the bogies popping out into the interior of the vehicle, which forces awkward seating layouts and less doors. Subway trains in places like Hong Kong have up to 5 doors on every car, which is the kind of capacity to move people on and off of trains you're just not going to get with light rail. Low-floor light rail does make sense in some places, where most of the route is on street and you want low, curb-style boarding platforms. But most of the route here is not on street, even in the proposed IBX plan, so low-floor doesn't make sense. I mean, honestly, if the MTA decides it has to build light rail, at least do high-floor light rail, which exists in cities like LA and Rotterdam, and can allow for fully flat-floor vehicles, which are more accessible for people with mobility impairments and are higher capacity. And the higher capacity is a no-brainer. The MTA is projecting 88,000 daily riders on the IBX, and I think that's really low. The Eglinton Crosstown, which I referenced before, is a similar crosstown light rail route that connects to a number of radial lines, albeit in a smaller city and with less connections than the IBX, and projections for it have ridership way higher than those projected for the IBX. I think the light rail option is setting up the MTA's narrative of a line which is successful and was built quickly and cost effectively, and likely to turn it into an underbuilt line that is always crowded, or even worse, a line which doesn't meet its potential. And that potential goes beyond the existing route. Well, in the MTA's Q&A document, they kind of blow off the idea of extending the IBX beyond the initial route, and perhaps that's reasonable in the short term. In the long term, there's not an obvious reason to me why you wouldn't want to, say, extend it to LaGuardia Airport, or potentially even Staten Island. Choosing a faster and higher capacity technology, like say Subway, gives you more flexibility to do useful extensions like these in the future. If planners were really forward-looking, they'd be optimizing the vehicles of today to make tunnels to those future extensions much easier in the future. I should also highlight that Subway does not mean New York Subway. Something you commonly see in situations where a transit agency is trying to avoid building a certain thing is they misconstrue what a certain transit mode actually is. For example, I could imagine the case being made that IBX can't be Subway because existing subway trains are too wide. Of course, this ignores the fact that New York also has narrower subway trains which are similarly wide to light rail vehicles, which is why I'm really confused why the MTA suggested that a subway-style option would require widening the right-of-way. Another somewhat reasonable argument I could imagine hearing is, well, what about if there are tight corners? But again, high-floor light rail trains are essentially subway trains with a bend in the middle. Rotterdam and Istanbul use them for high-capacity lines, and if New York has that issue, it could do the same. If you want to build something, you'll find a way to make it work. And it just doesn't seem like the powers that be in New York want a subway, which is disappointing because the potential here is huge for higher capacity, higher speeds, better service, and better connections. Getting the trains right today is so important. Of course, the MTA could always convert the technology that the line uses in the future, but conversions of rail lines from one technology to another are pretty uncommon historically, especially for extremely well-used lines. Building the IBX as Subway today gives you much more practical options to upgrade it in the future, like say building better connecting stations to the various other subway routes. I fear that in order to make it look like the New York transit building apparatus has things together today, which it obviously doesn't, we're going to build the wrong project for the New Yorkers not of today, but for 100 years in the future. I, for one, would much rather be one of the New Yorkers from 100 years ago who had the foresight to build the incredible subway system of today. All, I'll note, without computers or modern tunnel boring machines. New York is a city people love to criticize, but this time you can actually do something about it. Call your elected representatives, follow people like BQ Rail, and attend public meetings. The IBX is good today, but it could be amazing. Now, we've already talked a bit about Paris's beautiful new trams, which, while not the perfect solution for New York's IBX corridor, are perfect for Paris's urban landscape, and add a beautiful touch to the city's historic streets. So if you're interested in how another of the world's biggest and most iconic cities' beautiful streets and boulevards were developed, I've got the perfect video for you. Dave from City Beautiful talks about how the intricate designs of Paris's boulevards changed the city forever and helped make it what it is today as part of his Nebula original Great Cities series, and you can watch it exclusively on Nebula right now. Nebula is the streaming platform owned by me and my creator friends, featuring over 14,000 titles that you can watch ad-free, including exclusive and early access videos from urbanist educational content creators like myself, City Nerd, Not Just Bikes, and City Beautiful. And of course, you can check out episodes of Jetlag the game a week early, so you won't ever miss out on any of the action. Catch up on the first 8 seasons before Season 9 Switzerland premieres soon. This is one of the best ways you can support my channel and my content as a whole, and right now you can get an awesome deal on yearly memberships for only $2.50 a month. So go check out the link on screen or in the description right now.